You're listening to Security Pro Insights. If you're in a leadership position, you're probably there because you like to win. In fact, most of our efforts are spent working to demonstrate the extreme value that we can offer the organization we work for. Well, whether you're a new or experienced leader, today's episode with our guest, Sara Mays, a leadership veteran, she is here to explain how to win as a leader in any organization you may be leading. Sara, welcome to the show today. I want to thank you for joining us. As always, start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, Scott. I'm excited to join you today, so thank you for having me. A little bit about me. I grew up just outside of Atlanta, and I started my professional career with the aspirations to teach. But I graduated in December, and there really aren't any teaching positions at that time of the year. So I ended up working at Macy's as a visible security officer, and then became a store detective and eventually a security manager. So that was more than 20 years ago. And through that, retail gets in your blood, and I became very passionate about it, and have really enjoyed all my years with it and continue to do so. As I went through various roles and I moved to New York, one of the messages that was always key for me, my first boss taught me, and he's like, you always speak in the language of the customer. So when you're talking to a merchant, you've always got to talk about sales or whatever. And that really hit home for me when I got to New York because, these people here can be very direct and very strong. So I learned pretty quickly that you had to speak in their language, you had to be authentic, and you certainly had to be empathetic, or they were never going to listen to you. So it was a great learning curve for me. And then as I got promoted into additional roles and I got more involved with people in the home office, the business partners from IT and HR and logistics and legal and operations, I really learned to modify what he taught me and just continue with that, what your audience want to hear. And if you go from that angle, then they're going to listen to you, but you got to start from their side of the house first. And his name is Bill Brigham, and I'm still in touch with him today, and he's been a great mentor for me all these years. So
That's awesome. So you really fell into this whole security thing by accident. It was not part of the plan whatsoever.
Not a bit, like most people, I think, Scott. So none of us did. They were building a Macy's near my house, and again, it was December. I needed a job, so I went up and got hired. And I was actually hired because the security manager liked the fact that one of my summer jobs was working at a trout farm cleaning fish. So he thought that was so cool that a girl did that. So he hired me. So
There you go, and the rest is history, as they say. I
yeah, very much.
Often I say that this industry has a way of doing one of two things to individuals who join it. It either churns you out quickly, or if you stay beyond that 1 year, maybe 2 years, you're in it forever. It is a very difficult industry to get out of once you're actually in it.
Yeah, I would completely agree with it. I had a break at one point. I left Macy's and I went to work for a police department, and I was only there about 6 months, and it's just, it just wasn't what I loved. I just love the people in retail. I love doing something different every day, and been doing it a long time now, and still enjoy those connections and have lifelong friends as a result of it.
Absolutely. One of the things I loved about some of the things you just said about the customer, always speak the language of the customer. I think many of us in our youth, we have these jobs, whether it be at McDonald's, whether it be on the trout farm. For me, it was actually Domino's Pizza. And I learned about customer service then, and I remember a boss always telling me the customer's always right, and it just reminded me to always listen to the customer and try to make them happy and please them. One of the things that did not translate for me for a period of time is the realization that every department within the organization I work for is actually a customer. It's not just the person making the buying transaction. It's anyone I deal with is technically a customer.
I totally agree. I mean, I don't think that we spend enough time talking about that anymore, but certainly you start with your internal customer and then you transition from there. But if you don't take care of your frontline employees, if you don't take care of your internal customers, they're not going to be able to take care of your external customers. So at the end of the day, it all flows together.
Well, this is a perfect transition and fairly accidental by all means, but to really what we want to talk about, you are known as a great leader in the industry. Anything I've ever read of yours, anything I've ever heard of yours comes from uh, a very experienced leader, but now I understand things. Understanding that you wanted to be a teacher, that part has never left you. Everything I hear from you every time we speak, Sarah, is from a teacher standpoint. You're wanting to help people grow. You're always trying to help people learn and that coaching aspect of it. So I look forward to today's conversation as we talk about how you have really embraced, I think, teaching as a part of your leadership style. Would that be an incorrect way of saying that?
I think it's absolutely. I think it's been the centerpiece of everything that I've done, regardless of what it was, because I think you always walk into a situation and you assume that the person, doesn't have the information, that they haven't been trained. I've had regionals that, came on board and they go visit a store and the manager say, "Oh, I was never told that," and they'd be like, "Can you believe that?" And I'd be like, "Well, regardless of whether I believe it or not, you need to just work from the place that they never had the information. So let's teach them, provide them the information, and give them the opportunity to be successful." And that was the place that we always came from. Everything, there was a lesson in everything. If it was a incident, a negative incident involving a customer or whatever it was, there was something to be learned from that. So how do we take that and build a training program around that? And we modified our training programs, every probably 12 to 18 months. We tweaked them to some degree just based upon how the business has changed. And I think the managers at the end of the day really appreciated, that we were that flexible and that we were always listening to their voice. And I think, we had great results as a result of that. So.
Absolutely. And really, for the listeners, I don't think I let the cat completely out of the bag yet. One of the things we really plan to talk about today, or the main topic, is really just how to win within the business environment. Specifically, getting buy in and support from every person in the internal organization, whether that be other departments, whether that be employees that support the actual security plan. But at the end of the day, getting and gaining that support is the way to win. And I don't think I took too much away from the conversation by starting there, Sarah. What I found interesting with what you just said is a starting point of not judging what the other person said, but hearing it and understanding that whether it's true or not, that's their perception, so that is their truth, and starting from that point at the communication process.
Absolutely. I think you have to always operate from that, and you have to continually ask questions for clarity. I think, in retail in general and specifically LP, and I've been guilty of this certainly myself, is we're in such a hurry to try to solve people's problems that we don't always listen as thoroughly as we need to. So what I've really been focused on the last several years is really trying to slow down, trying to listen at a greater depth, ask more questions for clarity. But at the end of the day, I think we always have to communicate proactively. So whether we call that teaching or whatever it is, I think you have to have that ongoing communication with the partners. You just can't pick up the phone out of the blue and expect them to, jump sky high when, there is a negative situation that occurs. I think you have to work on those relationships week in and week out and build them over time. And then you gain a level of trust. And with that, you can move mountains.
Don't you find it funny how we often forget the day-to-day knowledge that we really know and understand and the way we live our life, and we fail to take this into a corporate environment? So an example would be this. In real life, if you help me, let's say, move, I move from one house to another, and you, as a friend, are willing to help me in that transition, the reality is I'm going to turn right around and help you with whatever request you have in the future. It's a give and take. It's standard human nature. There's also an aspect of likability in that. It's not always just about doing, but you taking interest in me is going to ultimately have a reaction on my end where I'm going to have interest in you when needed in the future. It's standard human nature, but I don't always see us take that into the corporate environment of, just as you said, taking the time to really listen, proactively communicate, be empathetic, and start gaining that bank account of response for a later date.
Yeah, I had a district manager one time. He coined the phrase emotional bank. So you're always making deposits to the emotional bank. And when you need to make a withdrawal, you don't necessarily feel guilty about it because you've been building it up for a while. But to your point, I think you have to do that from the right place. You don't do it with the thought that you're going to get something back. You have to be authentic and do it, just from being a good person. And sometimes I don't think we move so fast we don't even think about that. So I think it's being appreciative of our partners at all times, and oftentimes, making that vocal. Like I had an IT partner who was on my inventory team who was fabulous and brought great ideas to the table that were outside of his world, but they were wonderful. So I ran into the CIO on the elevator one day and I said, look, I just want to tell you how great Tom's been on the team and he's really helped us and, has really elevated what we're trying to do. And, he remembered that for, a couple of years later, he still talked about, how much he appreciated me thanking his boss's boss's boss for what he was doing. So just those little moments can mean so much to people.
For sure. Sarah, to kind of proceed forward, I'm going to throw this out and see if you will walk with me down this particular path. In an organization, we tend to deal with multiple departments. So most of us listening to this podcast are security managers representing an organization from the physical security standpoint, and many of us starting to take on a cyber role. With that being said, it's a requirement to work with other departments. And I personally have been doing this for 20 plus years. And I commonly hear a struggle with two departments. This is not necessarily to pick on them. I apologize if you're an HR leader or an IT leader, but I hear complaints quite often regarding, oh, I have to work with HR. Oh, I have to work with IT. I can't seem to get the buy-in. I can't seem to get the support for what I'm wanting to do. Can we talk today from a perspective of we have a new IT manager or we have a new HR manager? I'll let you choose. But how to win and get their buy-in when there's an initial, maybe a struggle from the start?
Well, I think it's constant communication. So you're communicating proactively, not just when you have an incident that you need to sit down and go through something with them. I think it's building a process of regular communication. So whether it's biweekly or monthly or whatever it might be, I think if you can have some sort of routine where you're not always talking about a 911 situation, then I think that you can build that emotional bank up, and you can talk about things outside of work a little bit, and then just find those bonds, and then figure out where people are coming from. And I think that certainly helps. I mean, when somebody's new in an organization, I think it's a little easier. You're almost you're very curious about what they've done, and you kind of talk through situations and you kind of, get a perspective of where they're coming from. And then that can kind of guide you a little bit. But I think if you always come from it from, a good place and you're authentic, and you're concerned and you want to help them adjust to the organization, I think they always remember that. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to butt heads sometimes, because certainly you should. Everybody shouldn't always agree all the time, because if you're not, then you're probably not doing the best things for the organization. But at least if you do, there's a healthy respect there from the other person's perspective, and then you can grow from that. Because certainly, I've had situations with HR where they thought somebody should be terminated and I didn't. And so, we were having the debate the opposite way, which is normally not what HR and LP does. It's usually the other way. But are we doing the right thing at the end of the day, based upon the situation? And just kind of talking things through and learning from those things is very important. And then referencing them when you go back, because then you build a history with someone, and then you can reference that. And, all that gives you credibility at the end of the day.
If I can bounce back, though, you talk about the importance of the connection in order to be able to handle all of this potential conflict that may come up down the road. And as you well said, is it should happen, quite frankly, but it all starts with the connection. Many of us tend to be intimidated when we have to approach and work with someone from a different department, because their knowledge base is different than the knowledge base we have. And we just tend to get intimidated by the fact of, well, what if they expect me to know something that I don't naturally know? Then they may not look at me as being an intelligent human being. How do I overcome that and just break this down to a personal connection? Do you have any advice there?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is you have to ask a lot of questions, because I think pretty much anybody who's passionate about what they do, they also love to teach like I do. So I think, if you're sitting in, someone in human resources office and you need to understand something, I think, you ask the questions. And I think at the end of the day, they'll be very appreciative of that. Maybe there's a labor law you don't understand or something like that. I think you have to be open to learning. And I think if you're open to it, they're also going to be open to it. So if you humble yourself to ask the questions, they will also do the same about your business. And that goes a long way. It's building blocks. It's building a foundation, of trust and a relationship that's going to move forward for a long time. So I think you just have to start that out with the right mindset, and say, look, I don't know everything about HR. These are the few things I do know. Could you help me understand the specific laws in California around punches or something like that? And let them explain it to you. And I think they appreciate that. And it puts them in a good place. It makes them feel good about themselves, because they're helping you. And at the end of the day, people like to help people. They like to teach people.
So it sounds like, if I can pull a little bit out of that, humble ourselves a little bit. Don't try to go in acting like the authority or acting like we know everything. Really just humbling ourselves and approaching them with a level of interest and a level of learning from them, putting it out there. My boss always says some of the most powerful words you can ever say is, could you possibly help me? And it sounds like by that humble question, it'll open them up and then allow that connection to naturally take place.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Well, as you know, as a teacher, education's a passion of yours, and I also think it's a big part of this connecting with other departments is just helping them as well. So I think it's natural when I start asking questions that they're going to turn around and they're going to begin asking questions of me as well. Is education a big part of this connecting of the individuals within these departments? And what are your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, I think you're proactively communicating, and I think a part of that connection and that information is, what do you work on that's shared? So if it's a merchant, for example, looking at sales results and shrink results and talking about how they play hand in hand. I mean, the world's really big right now on omni-channel, so on hands are super important. a lot of old school merchants don't understand the importance of that necessarily. So, just tying the whole shrink and sales message back to them, and the significance of accurate on hands and driving their business, I think is key. I had a newer vice president call me once, and he goes, Sarah, I'm very concerned. He goes, we rolled out this, new program, and he said, I have this whole market, and like nothing's going on, like nothing's moving. And I said, as it would happen, I was going to that market the next week. So I was in the very first store, and I was with the district manager, and I said, why I'm here, I need to look at, X product. And she turned to the manager, she goes, where is it? And he goes, oh, it's still in the stock room. We didn't get a message to get it out. So sure enough, her whole district had left it in the stock room. It never made it to the sales floor. I called the VP, and he spoke to his person who had never clearly communicated to the market that this product needed to hit the floor on X date. So at the end of the day, it was something pretty simple. It was a communication breakdown. But in his mind, he was thinking the product got put out and it all got stolen. So he was calling me. So, it was kind of good that we could just work together and say, no, it wasn't anything as complicated as that. So,
Well, I think what's really good about that is you somehow took yourself out of what your actual role was in order to just help them be better within their department. So you broke down the departmental lines to say, wherever I can help, I'll help, even if it doesn't necessarily translate into my day-to-day responsibilities.
well, at the end of the day, we're all responsible for sales and whatever that means. So I think we have to wear a lot of different hats, especially in the challenging times that we live in. And, we have to understand sales hides a multitude of sins. So the more sales you have, the better off the organization is going to be. So if you can help anybody drive those sales, a store manager or district manager, a merchant, if you can help them drive the business, it's beneficial for everyone. So if we have to put on a different hat every now and then, I think that's great. I mean, one of the things that we always worked on as a team was, trying to remove obstacles from the stores to try to help them focus on customer service. You're empowered to own your business, and customer service is so important. And they'd be like, why do the LP people talk about customer service so much? Well, I think, the world knows, how important it is. But when you get a newer person who's not used to that, who comes from a different environment where they don't hear it, they're very appreciative of that.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around everything we've talked about and putting myself back in the beginning stage of here I am as a security manager, and I have this new goal or this new objective I would like to accomplish. I have personally done my research, and I know that it is a great fit for the organization. All I need to do is get buy-in from these other departments, and we are good to go. If I could just educate them on this is, I know they would buy into it. What's so interesting to me, and we've just discussed over and over, is I don't really know if you can educate someone without gaining this level of respect through the initial connections. I don't know why they would offer you their attention for you to be able to educate them. It all comes down to this personal connection that has to take place before we try to get anything out of them. I guess going back to this bank account. I know I'm talking in circles, but the more I think about it, there's just no way of making it work without these connections.
Well, and to your point, Scott, I think the connections, they really need to start one-on-one. One of the things that if we had a program or a project that we really wanted to roll out, you start with the one-on-one conversations about whatever it is. And you tie that conversation around your audience. If it's HR, how does it benefit them, IT or whatever? And then after you've planted those seeds and had those conversations, then you might pull a bigger meeting together with those business partners and then talk about it collectively. But I think the mistake that a lot of people make sometimes is they have a great idea, and I think a lot of the ideas are probably fabulous, but they pull everybody together at once. They haven't made those connections. They've not put any money in those emotional banks, and you get a table of a half a dozen people, and you're saying this is a plan that we need to do, whatever, and you don't have buy-in from anybody at the table, and then it just snowballs in a negative way. So if you can plant those seeds ahead of time, one-on-one by different departments, and then pull the group together after you get their buy-in and hear their feedback, you're going to have a much better product at the end. The result is going to be so much better because you listen to other people, and you do it slower, but you do it in the right way.
Sarah, I have to ask a question that may stretch you a little bit because I don't think I mentioned we would get to this, but it just comes to my mind. We all like to hear stories. Do you have one in your years of experience where you've seen a manager try to accomplish a goal without the connection, maybe try to use what I'm going to say is force, not from a physical standpoint, but just trying to push something through without having buy-in? And what were the results? And can you just give us a description of what that looks like? Because I think all of us can think up a story here or there. I'd just like to hear from you based on your past.
Well, one of the things that we rolled out an incident management program during my time, and one of the way that we tested it was we started with a single manager, and then we did a manager in each district. So we had 60-something managers who were testing the program, and then we, would have conference calls with them, get feedback, and it took many months to roll it out. But we did it slow, we did it methodical, and that was pretty much how we did everything. So an exception reporting system, incident management, awareness program, everything that we did, we would roll out very slowly and get feedback along the way from the end user before you go with it. We had some other partners from other parts of the organization, and they rolled out this massive program to the company. It was never tested. And the managers were like, this thing is awful. I can't believe they did this to us. It's very hard to use. It's complex. And, they basically had to call a timeout and put a freeze on it and go back and do a bunch of fixes. And then they rolled it out with, a test in each district the way that we had done it. But again, people get in a hurry because they want to see the end result. Now, we had projects too where we would get pushed to roll something out faster than we wanted to. And I remember one in particular, we rolled out a cycle count program faster than we wanted to. And at the end of the day, the results, they weren't what we intended them to be. And you learn from that. You learn that regardless of who's pushing the buttons, even if it's a CEO, you have to call a timeout and move slower, or, at least wave the red flag and give all the warnings about the potential downside of not doing so.
Slow and steady always takes me back to the story of the tortoise and hare. It's timeless. Yep. It's timeless and not used enough. One of the things that comes to mind is we've talked about these relationships and these connections and getting a project through. I look back on my career, and again, I have 20 plus years in this industry. You have quite a bit of time in this industry, which means that these relationships never really die. They must continue. It's not just get this relationship for a single project and be done. I have to maintain this relationship for a longer period of time. One of my personal soapboxes right now is I believe we as a society we're not great at maintaining long-term relationships. We actually do okay at starting a relationship, building a relationship, but our struggle is in the maintaining area. And I guess what I look at is a high divorce rate in our society these days. And it just seems like we as people, when times get tough or difficult, we just tend to dismiss relationships rather than work to maintain them. I'm seeing this move in the business environment as well, where I see a lot of people work together well in an early stage, but then almost get to fighting and quite frankly hate each other at some point. Do you have any tips for us on how to take these relationships that we've built and actually maintain them and keep them for the long term?
Well, I mean, I think it takes care like a garden, right? I mean, I think it's meeting on a fairly regular basis, even if it's a hallway meeting. Hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? I think it's that regular touch base. I think if you're only calling them when there's something that's blowing up, you can butt heads. I think it just takes care and it takes time, and again, time is something that's very precious, and none of us have enough of it. But at the end of the day, you know, people care about how you treated them. So, if you're only walking to their office to talk to them and ask them about, a shrink number or something like that, but you never have the time for them outside of that once or twice a year to even say hello to them. They remember that. They know how you make them feel. So at the end of the day, you always want to make people feel good, and then they're going to want to help you, whatever it is. So I think it's always trying to be positive, regardless maybe how you feel. It's always you got to be empathetic and try to think about how you're making the other person feel.
The other day, I heard someone, and I forget who it was, so I apologize to that person because I should give them credit, but they were talking about the power of a written thank you note. Even in today's
Mm.
age, everyone thinks about doing a quick email reply of, hey, full acknowledgement to someone by a written thank you note, taking physical time out of your life to put that together really bolsters that relationship and shows appreciation. And what are your thoughts behind that? I'm sure you agree with it, but just the genuine appreciation, does that how far does that go in maintaining a relationship?
Oh, I think it goes for Gary Johnson, who was my initial boss that hired me at Barnes and Noble. He was great about that. I still have the notes that he wrote me years ago.
Wow.
I think they're very important, and I've tried to do that. I can't say that I've been excellent at it by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that is very important, and we just don't do enough of it. So.
So if we were to summarize this whole winning thing, it still really comes down, if you want to be a successful manager in an organization, this podcast is really geared towards security managers, but at the end of the day, any departmental leader can gain from this. It sounds like winning comes from building and maintaining real, authentic relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Communicate proactively, connect with people, educate and appreciate them, and act with integrity, and be who you are. People can recognize whether you're in a store or you're in somebody's office, they recognize when you're not being genuine, no matter how good you think you are at it. So I think being authentic is something that we don't really talk about enough, but I think it's so important.
Sarah, I want to finish with a question that I believe you'll have a good, solid answer for. It's my personal belief that our educational systems, uh, I'll specifically say in America because I don't know the other cultures, the educational systems in America tend to focus on the information that is critical for the job at hand. So if I'm studying for criminal justice, I'm going to know everything about criminal justice or being a mathematician or you name the topic. It gets really in the weeds of that topic, but I don't know many institutions that focus on just the importance of relationship and building relationships and maintaining relationships. I think we try to live in a world of, oh, it's just natural. I shouldn't have to teach anybody that. But I don't think it is. I don't think it's as naturally as it even sounds in this episode. Let's say that's an area I know I can grow in. Do you have some books, some resources, some things you would recommend to help me get better in my communication, to help me get better in my relationship skills?
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of books that I read, and I think, and I heard on another podcast, that there's a lot of people in this business that are introverts. I myself am an introvert, and so it takes a little bit more effort, to knock on somebody's door or pick up the phone and call somebody or stand up in front of a group of people or whatever. But over time and practice, you get more and more comfortable with it. I love Patrick Lencioni. One of the people that I used to work with, Michelle Jones, she turned me on to him, and I've read most of his books. I think, the way he tells a story with fables and stuff, pretty much anything that he's written, it's a quick read. There's great lessons in there, and a lot of it is about how to treat people. Currently, I've been reading Ann Rhodes' Built on Values, which really talks about values in organizations and how to bring clarity to those values down to the frontline employees. And part of that certainly is how you treat people. And I think that's obviously super important. There's another book out there called Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly that I read a long, long time ago. And again, it's a fable-like story, but it talks about, sitting down with employees and figuring out what's important to them and then helping people achieve their dreams and things like that. So, at the end of the day, life is really all about connections. And I think, to your point, we get very hurried sometimes, and we just get in such a hurry that we don't take the time to learn about the people that we're working elbow to elbow with. I think that's kind of sad, but I've certainly been guilty of it myself because, we all try to move at the speed of light. So, I think sometimes you just have to slow down and, realize that the quality of what you're going to produce from a project and the way you're going to make people feel at the end of the day, if you go slower with that, it's going to make you a better person. It's going to make the business better, and it's going to make you much more successful.
Did I just hear you say that busy's not necessarily better?
Correct. But that's not the culture that we live in. I mean, we live in a culture where, busyness is rewarded. And I one of the things that, I was really, big on with my team, and they were fabulous at, for the most part. When you walk into a store, you say hello to everybody. You say hello to, regardless of what position the person has. You introduce yourself, you take a minute to chat with them. Everybody whose path you cross, you speak to them. I always try to do that in the home office. I tried to say hello to everybody, from the, the maintenance people to, VP, CEO, whoever it was. You just say hi to them. You talk to everybody. And I think that's important. And people, they don't necessarily want to, it's a CEO, I shouldn't speak to him. Yeah, you should. Just say hi. Just, there's nothing wrong with that. Say, hey, it's a beautiful day outside, whatever. People remember that. People remember that you were open enough and confident enough to speak to them. And then, 2 weeks later, when you need to go knock on their door, they're going to remember you because you chatted in the elevator.
Yeah, and believe it or not, they're actually just a human being, just like you and me.
Exactly. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. So.
Well, Sara, hey, our time has come to an ending point, unfortunately. I know that you, at the core of who you are, you're an educator, you're a speaker, you're a teacher. I know that you're currently transitioning into some new aspects of your life and career, and we don't have time to discuss that per se, but what I do know is that you are willing to coach and teach and speak to anyone who might reach out to you with questions on how to be a better leader or how they can get more departmental collaboration within their organization. So for someone that might want to reach out to you and connect with you, how do they do so?
You can certainly link me in. It's Mays, Mays, Sara with no H. And my email is smays4@yahoo.com. So you can certainly email me, and I'd be happy to chat with you, plan some time so we can get on the phone and chat. I love doing that. I love working with people. At my last company, I still had regular contact with store detectives and guards, and I love working with people. At the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and one other thing I'm going to throw out there that I think you've put a lot of thought into is the world of retail loss prevention is changing drastically, specifically in the reduction of brick and mortar out there. For those who may just be wanting to talk to you about opportunities for the future, you would be able to help with that as well, correct?
I will do my very best. I have friends all over the country that, I connect with. I had lunch yesterday with someone I worked with for, you know, 20 years, and I try to stay connected to as many people as I can, and just brainstorm about certain things. So there's a couple of projects that I'm working on right now that's centered around, helping companies and, the values things that we've been talking about. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, all right. Again, Sarah, I want to thank you for your time. It has been a great conversation. I can tell you that I am passionate about many of these same topics along with you, so keeping it within a relatively short time frame is, well, almost a miracle. So with that, though, in order to keep this time where we try to keep it, we do need to say goodbye. And again, I want to thank you for your time today, and many, I just wish you great success in all your future opportunities.
Thanks so much, Scott. I appreciate you having me.